2% of my time thinking about politics. Why are we letting this 2% dominate how we see each other when there's 98% where we have a lot in common?
Communication is a superpower. Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist and best-selling author Charles Duhigg knows that as well as anyone. He's influenced millions of readers through his work over the years and has proven that good storytelling is the key to transforming the way we collaborate, influence, and ultimately connect.
Listening is not just hearing what the person is saying, it's what you do after they finish talking. If you have a conflict with someone, the best way to sort of bring the tension down is ask a question, repeat back what you hear the person says in your own words. And then step number 3 is ask them if you got it right. And that's really what active listening is. It's about not just passively receiving, it's about amplifying.
Very good.
The goal of a conversation is simply to understand what the other person is trying to tell you.
How much of communication do you think is actually the ability to listen correctly?
A huge amount. So, and let me say that there's this thing about listening, which is when I'm talking, whatever you're doing, I'm probably not going to pay attention to it because it's so cognitively intense to try and speak that even though I'm going to make eye contact with you and I'm going to kind of notice if you're frowning or smiling or whatever it is, I'm really not going to pick up on the signals you're sending me. So listening is not just hearing what the person is saying, it's what you do after they finish talking. Because if you do this thing where you prove to me that you've been listening, and in the psychology literature, this is actually referred to as looping for understanding.
Okay.
That particularly if you have a conflict with someone, the best way to sort of bring the tension down is ask a question, repeat back what you hear the person says in your own words. Okay. And then step number 3, which is the one we usually forget, is ask them if you got it right. And if I do that, so when you think about it, so I'm listening to you. I have to listen closely to you because I'm thinking I got to repeat back what you're saying in my own words. I got to process it. But most importantly, you know that I've been listening based on what I say after you're done speaking. And that's really what active listening is. It's about not just passively receiving. It's about amplifying.
Very good. Man, that is really good. It feels so good to have somebody say that back to you.
Right?
Because you do get the feeling with most people, I think they do 2 things. 1, they're really more concerned with what they're about to say back to you.
Yes.
And 2, I call them verbal nudges, where they're interrupting you too often or which you think is a form of agreement, but I think to some extent sometimes you're almost saying, I got it. Okay, can I say something now?
Yeah.
And
That's
you're almost
exactly
nudging them to finish rather than letting them finish.
I think that's exactly true. And I think that part of this is understanding what the goal of a conversation is.
Okay.
So it's easy to go into a conversation and think the goal is to convince this person I'm right, or maybe even the goal is just to come to agreement on something. That's wrong. The goal of a conversation is simply to understand what the other person is trying to tell you. So that means that if I'm listening to you and you say something that I think is crazy, you wouldn't say this, but lizard people run the world or whatever it is. I'm not going to agree with you, and I'm probably not going to convince you that you're wrong, but as long as I understand how you see the world, as long as I ask you a question, what's known as a deep question, where I say, like, why is this important? Like, what is it about this that seems really meaningful and important to you? You're going to tell me something about who you are. I'm going to repeat back what you've told me about, like, I care about lizard people because I really think the elites of this world are having this pernicious effect on the working class. I'm going to repeat that back to you. I'm going to ask you if I got it right. I'm not going to agree with you and you're not going to agree with me, but simply understanding each other means we have succeeded. And it feels good, right?
It does. I'm just thinking of like political discourse, like just really understand where they're coming from. I'm not going to win this. So let me ask you this.
Okay.
There are really 3 conversation types, okay? I didn't know there were. I was kind of oblivious to this, but I think just this alone would enlighten people so they know which conversation they're in and they can identify it. So
Absolutely.
share some of that.
This is a big discovery from the last decade, and we're kind of living through this golden age of understanding communication and for the first time in a new way. And what the first thing that researchers have found is that we think of a discussion as being about one thing. We're talking about my book, or we're talking about your kids.
Yeah.
But actually, every discussion is made up of different kinds of conversations. And most of those different kinds of conversations fall into one of 3 buckets. There's a practical conversation where we're talking about plans or making decisions together, or we're fixing problems. Politics is often this. There's an emotional conversation where if I tell you how I'm feeling about something, I do not want you to fix it for me. I want you to acknowledge that you've heard it, and I want you to tell me to sort of be vulnerable with me. And then there's a social conversation. And a social conversation is about how we relate to each other in society, how we think other people see us, how our identities, right? How our identities shape how we see the world in different and interesting ways. And the key is, there's this thing known as the matching principle, which is if I'm having an emotional conversation and you respond with a practical conversation, even though both of what we're saying is legit, we're not going to hear each other.
That is outstanding.
This happens at home, like with my spouse all the time. I come home, I've had a tough day at work, I'm complaining about my boss. My wife says, she solves the problem. She says, why don't you go and like take him out to lunch and get to know each other better? And instead of being like, that's really good advice, I'm like, you don't understand, you're not listening to me. Like,
Very good, Charles. Yeah.
So if she matches me and then invites me to match her, then we're having the same kind of conversation. Then we can hear each other.
You just explained 25 years of problems. No, because I'm coming home to an emotional conversation and I'm not in one sometimes.
Yeah.
You have any advice for an introvert as it comes to communication like this?
I think when it comes to introverts or when you move to a new place, like one of the things that I like to do is you meet someone at a party or a barbecue or whatever it is. And like I often ask them, what do you do for a living? And then I'll often say, they say, I'm a lawyer. And I say, do you love practicing the law? Like, what made you decide to become a lawyer? Like, when was the moment you decided to become a lawyer? What inevitably they say is something that tells me about their other identities, which is, I became a lawyer because I saw my dad get arrested and I wanted to fight for the underdog. Or I became a lawyer because we were poor and I wanted to always have enough money. Or I became a lawyer because I love intellectual stimulation. Like, think of those three answers just told me so much about those different people. And at that point, I can say to them, I grew up poor too. Like, I understand what that's like. And now suddenly we feel safe with each other. I think this isn't necessarily true for introverts, but when we're in new social situations and we were talking about how hard it is to make friends when you don't have friends in a place, anyone can be a super communicator. It's literally just a set of skills. Like, you just have to practice the skills and make them into habits. Nobody's born knowing how to do this. So here's the thing that you're exactly right. 50%, if not more, of a good conversation is asking good questions. Okay. But then something happens. There's a difference between a conversation and an interrogation, right? Or an interview. Yeah. And this gets into what's known as emotional reciprocity. And emotional reciprocity is basically one of the strongest impulses that all humans have. If somebody engages in emotional reciprocity, we can't help but feel a little bit closer and a little bit more trusting of them. So emotional reciprocity says, if you say something vulnerable, and then I acknowledge that vulnerability, but I also show that I can be vulnerable, then we're going to feel like we can trust each other. And that's about speaking. So that doesn't mean if you say, my dad passed away, I should be like, oh, I understand completely because my aunt passed away 12 years ago. Okay. Like, that's stealing the spotlight from you, right? Okay. But if you say, my dad passed away, and I say, oh man, I know how hard that can be. Like, tell me about your dad. What was he like?
Oh gosh, it's good.
Right? And then and what I'm signaling to you is A, I'm interested in you. I want to hear from you. I want to understand you. But B, you learned something about me. And if you're interested, you can say tell me how you know about this. Like, what happened?
What about being the server first, serving the vulnerability first?
Absolutely. Okay. There's a guy named Nick Epley at the University of Chicago who's in the book. And like, Nick is so good at this. Every conversation I've ever had with him, he says something in the conversation, near the start of the conversation, that feels so intimate. And as a result, I'm just like, I love this guy. Like, I just want to talk to him. And again, when I look at the transcripts, because I'm oftentimes talking to him for reporting, and when I read the transcript, it doesn't seem too intimate. It doesn't seem overly intimate, but he says things like, hey, Nick, how are you doing? Like, instead of saying, oh, fine, says something like, it's great. I went to my son's soccer game this weekend. And we adopted these kids from Ethiopia, and just watching them now as these strong young men. It was a great weekend.
Brother, and
you're
on it.
Right. And he's offered that up. And at that point, I'm like, Man, I'll tell you all about myself.
Let me tell you about me. I think I also trust you more when you do that.
Absolutely.
I think when someone's so surface all the time, and by the way, this applies for a lot of you that are in sales too.
Yes.
Being willing to be a little bit vulnerable, not always the expert, but a little bit vulnerable, a little bit transparent, a little bit revealing. I believe I think it's just a better way to live, but it does bond and connect you. It makes you human. Oftentimes when you're in sales, people look at you like you're almost their adversary. Like, I can't trust this guy or this lady. But when you begin to show some vulnerability and some authenticity, I think that's when you start to break down the barriers. And I found that in my own life.
Absolutely.
Over and over.
Trust is huge, right? I mean, so we have, communication is humans' superpower. Like, it's the reason as a species we have been so successful, is that we can talk to each other and we can share knowledge, we can build families and communities. All of that is based on communication. And communication over the millennia has been hardwired into our brain. And so as a result, when somebody communicates well with me, I trust them because I literally have 2 million years of evolution in my head that says, trust the guy who it seems like wants to understand you and that is sharing with you.
I agree. This is so good. This is probably going to go a little longer than normal, guys.
No, I love it.
I really love this, right? What about difficult conversations?
Yeah. So, and this has been a focus of a lot of study. How do we make conversations in conflict better? And there's basically two things. The first one is, I mentioned this looping for understanding, right? Asking a question, repeating back what you heard, and then asking if you got it right. That's enormously powerful in conflict.
Okay.
Because the first suspicion I have, if you disagree with me and we're in conflict with each other, is you're waiting your turn to speak. You're not hearing what I'm saying, right? You're just waiting there and like, I'm going to tell you my piece and then you're going to just bulldoze over me and I'm going to bulldoze back. So if you interrupt that by proving you are listening, using looping for understanding to prove, I really want to understand what you're saying, help me understand, I'm taking a huge amount of mistrust off the table. The second thing that often happens in conflict, and this happens a lot in marriages, this actually comes from marriage therapy and studies of marriage therapy, is that it is natural when we feel threatened to want to control things. And the easiest thing to control is the other person. So you tell me your thing and I'm like, no, you don't know the evidence. Let me show you the evidence. You say something and you're like, I'm not even going to listen to this. I try and control you. I try and tell you what you should believe, what you should feel. That's toxic, right? In a marriage, that is the thing that destroys a marriage. The alternative is, I have a need for control. You have a need for control. We feel threatened. Can we find things to control together? So for instance, can we control the timing of this fight? Instead of having it at 2 a.m, can we wait till it's 10 a.m. and we're both a little bit more rested?
Very good.
Can we control ourselves? Can I let you know, I'm going to take a second before I speak and I'm going to think about what you just said. Can I show you that I'm trying to control myself and invite you to control yourself? And the third thing is we can control the boundaries of the conflict itself. So one of the most toxic patterns in marriages is this thing called kitchen sinking, where we start arguing about like where we're going to go for New Year's. And then like 5 minutes later, it's like, and your mother hates me and you don't earn enough money. And like, why are you such a jerk all the time? Right. So a fight about one thing becomes a fight about everything. The healthy way to do that is to say, we need to have a fight. Like we have a disagreement on something. Let's control the boundaries of it. We're talking about New Year's Eve. If my mother comes up and your money comes up, like we're just going to set it aside. That's another conversation, another day.
Very good.
But then when we're controlling these three things, we're controlling ourselves, we're controlling the environment, and we're controlling the boundaries of the fight or the conflict. We're controlling those as partners, right? We're on the same side of the table. We might not agree on the topic we're discussing,
right?
But you and I are partners now in controlling the right things in this fight instead of trying to control each other.
That's outstanding. When you're talking about relationships and family, first off, I've made those mistakes.
Me too.
I'm a pretty good kitchen sinker, now that you term it that way.
Yeah.
So is there anything with young people that these skills can be taught? Anything unique that you would say that goes with young people?
Absolutely. So I think for the younger kids, it's a little bit harder, right?
Yes.
But I think for them, this is where the deep questions become so powerful. So my younger one, same thing. How was school today? Good. Right. What'd you learn? Nothing. Right? Like, so some of the advice is like, be like, oh, well, did pirates show up today? And you can do that a couple times. Yeah. But at some point, if you ask them a question where you're asking them to tell you who they are, I know that you said that you like science more than you like math. I'm just wondering, like, why? Like, what is it? Was it about science? Like, I mean, is science important to you? Like, you told me you wanted to hang out with your friend, and I'm just wondering, like, what is it? What do you like about that friend? Like, what is special to him? Yeah. What's great about that is that, first of all, it's clearly not judgmental, right? Mm-hmm. Whereas if I'm like, what'd you learn today? Mm-hmm. I'm kind of judging. Like,
good point.
You better should have learned something today.
Very good point.
But second of all, I'm matching him and I'm allowing him to set the stage. Mm. It's not that he's playing on my ball court. Mm. I'm saying to him, tell me your ball court. Mm. And that's powerful.
You know when you've met a super communicator when?
When you walk away from that conversation and you think like, oh man, I like that guy or I like that woman. Mm. This is the funny thing about a super communicator is that they do not stand out necessarily as like the most they're not Bill Clinton was a super communicator, mm-hmm. but most super communicators don't look like Bill Clinton or Barack Obama or Donald Trump or like all these people. When you walk away from a conversation and you feel better, exactly what you said at the beginning of this conversation, that like I judge the conversation based on how I feel afterwards.
Yes.
And particularly if they do it so gracefully. And again, anyone can learn to do this. It's just a matter of practicing it to get graceful at it. It's like throwing a pitch, right? Like first couple times it looks pretty janky and then like you get graceful at it. You just practice it. When they do that, you just feel like this person took care of you.
Very good. Very true.
Dudes tend to lean practical. If I look at the three, practical, emotional, and social, I think my default, let me say this, I tend to be the classic guy, the problem solver, but I'm also a guy who likes to see peace. Mm-hmm. And so just thinking in my personal life, if Stacey comes to me or one of the kids comes to me something that's a little bit, it's a problem, and I get practical.
Yeah.
Is that true that men are just default practical?
Oftentimes for men, it's more comfortable to be practical, and for women, they're more comfortable with emotional conversations. But what's interesting is, and I saw sometimes that it sounded very practical, that actually what I would hear is you're having an emotional conversation, but you're using the language of practicality because that's what you're comfortable with. And finances is a great example of this, right? We sit down with our spouse to talk about our budget for the next week, for the next month. And we sit down and we say, okay, I've got the budget. Here's all the numbers. Let's go through. And it feels like what we're saying is a practical conversation. But what we're really saying is, I am really freaked out because we overspent last month. And I'm worried if we don't make tuition and mortgage this year, that something bad's going to happen. And so I need to have an emotional conversation with you about like, I'm anxious. I need you to be anxious too.
Wow.
So understanding what's actually happening in the conversation as opposed to just the words being used, that's at the core of how we connect with each other.
Wow. Do you think we could have conversations about race or politics or religion 50 years ago and it's gotten worse? Or are we just now so much more connected via devices and everybody can throw their opinion out? You understand the question?
Yeah.
Has it gotten worse or has it always been that way and we just are now exposed to the fact that none of us know how to communicate on something that's kind of controversial?
So I think there was a time when it was better in this country. I think
that would be my feeling.
Yeah, and all the research shows us we've become more polarized. A way I like to put it is we've kind of fallen out of practice of having these hard conversations, right? So 50 years ago, your and my grandfathers, they belonged to the Elks Club or to the Rotary Club, and they probably had a church that they went to on Sundays and then a prayer group on Wednesdays. They had a whole community, and in that community, they were practicing conversation all the time. They were very, very good at it. So that doesn't necessarily mean you and I agree with each other, but this gets to what the goal of a conversation is. The goal of a conversation is not for us to agree with each other. The goal of a conversation is not to convince you you're right or you're wrong and I'm right or I'm smart or you should like me. The goal of a conversation is just to understand how you see the world and to speak in such a way that you understand how I see the world. And if we walk away from a conversation disagreeing with each other, but we got that understanding, the conversation has been a success.
It's hard to hate somebody you understand.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And when you know that they want to understand you, you want to understand them in return.
Yeah.
So I think what happened in the past is that we just had more practice signaling that we wanted to understand. And we've fallen out of practice. We've fallen out of practice because of technology. We've fallen out of practice because it's a lot easier to not talk to people who disagree with us now. Or if we do talk to people who disagree with us, to be screaming at each other. But for each of us as leaders in our families and in our communities and in our businesses, we can take that responsibility on to not only practice doing this, but to model it for other people.
Yeah.
It used to be everyone watched the same newscast. And so we kind of all just agreed on what the same topics were. Now, the same important things to talk about. Now, that might have not have been as inclusive as it should have been. And it might have been talking about these issues and not that issues, but we all had a common prayer book that we were sort of reading from. Now, everything is so balkanized, right? You and I probably, our media diet probably overlaps by most 15%. And that's actually really, really high.
Wow.
Yeah. And if we were to do this whole room, I'll bet you that there's a podcast that one person in this room listens to and no one else listens to, and we can multiply that by 10. Everything is kind of balkanized now. So as a result, we're getting all these little different pieces of input, pieces of news. And so when I sit down with you and I want to talk about politics, in my head, I've got 5 things that I'm thinking about, that I've heard about, that seem like the most important things on earth. And you've got 5 different things that you've heard about that seem like the most important thing on earth. And you're saying, how to come he doesn't take seriously this thing that's so clearly important? That's where this breakdown happens. But so what cuts through that? What cuts through that is our lived experiences. Because it does not matter what newspaper you read or what podcast you listen to. We both have kids. We know what it's like to raise teenagers.
That's right.
They might watch completely different TikTok channels. They might watch, but they all sometimes act like 13-year-olds.
Well, you're very diplomatic with that.
So that's something, if we set all that stuff aside and we say, what's it like? Tell me what it's like to be raising kids. Let me tell you what it's like for me. Suddenly now we are reading from that same prayer book. We have the same experiences we can talk about. And that's how we get from there to saying like, oh, now that I know a little bit about you, like, who'd you vote for last time? Tell me a little bit about that.
That's great. That's really good.
I was just talking to a researcher at NYU, Jay Van Bayvel, who's done a lot of work on this. And one of the things he's found is that when we assign someone a label without knowing them, we assume that they maximize that label. So if I know that you're a Democrat, I assume you are all for, trans rights and gay marriage and X and Y and Z. And if you hear I'm a Republican, you're going to assume that I'm pro-gun and I'm pro-Trump and I pro-military. And the truth of the matter is, in actuality, yeah, you're a Democrat, but you're like 10% a Democrat, right? And I'm 10% a Republican. And so if we live side by side and we put those different signs on our lawn, then the truth of the matter is, the thing that we have in common, like I spend 2% of my time thinking about politics and 10% of my time thinking about the pothole that's in front of my house.
Right.
And my neighbor's thinking about that pothole too, right?
Yes, there's a shared value.
Exactly. So why are we letting this 2% dominate how we see each other when there's 98% where we have a lot in common?
Yeah.
And that's the key is, even if we know someone is a label, even if we hear this person is an X or a Y or a Z, or they self-identify that way, or we just look at them and we say, oh, that person is different from me, that does not mean that we've done a good job of estimating who they are. And the only way to estimate who they are is to go up and ask them about their experiences.
Who are some people that stand out to you? Doesn't have to be politicians, any sector. Right now, you go, these are truly super communicators.
But I think about Satya Nadella at Microsoft.
Okay.
So Microsoft was this company that was basically falling apart, right? People were at each other's throats. They were sort of living on this legacy business. Satya Nadella comes in as the new CEO, and he basically gets everyone to change their culture and their attitude. And when I've talked to people about why, one of the things that they say is, it's because he would talk about himself in these really vulnerable ways. He has a child who was born with disabilities. and actually passed away just a few years ago. And Satya would talk all the time about how hard it is to be a parent, that he understood how you have to balance life and home and work, and that some days you come in and you just can't be your best self because you're thinking about other stuff. And he somehow broke through this culture and convinced everyone to see each other in a new light. Steve Jobs would do the exact same thing in a very, very different way, right? Steve Jobs, everyone knows that he would be a jerk sometimes, he would be a yeller. But the people who work with him that I've talked to said, that's true. But what they don't tell you about is they don't tell you that, first of all, he was as critical with himself, and you saw that vulnerability. And second of all, he would always say, look, the reason I am so frustrated with you is because I know you are capable of amazing work. And this is not the amazing work yet, right? There isn't one kind of communication that works. There is wanting to communicate that works. And when we say wanting to communicate, that means not just saying, I've got an idea in my head and you better hear what it is and you should think I'm smart and I'm right and you're wrong, but wanting to hear from you what you're experiencing so that you can hear from me what I'm experiencing and so that we can come together.